Welcome to Magical Books for Kids, a podcast sponsored by Magic Everywhere, Inc., a company based in Florida. Hosted by Michael John Sullivan, this is your place to hear the very best children's stories and an opportunity to get to know your favorite authors. Now, here is Michael John Sullivan.
Hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining me for Magical Books for Kids. I'm Michael John Sullivan, and I'd like to, of course, welcome a very talented author, a nonfiction author, a rarity for us here at Magical Books for Kids. But also remember, this podcast and other podcasts that we do record are free on all platforms. And we'd like to welcome children's author Patricia Newman. Her books show young readers how their actions can ripple around the world. Using social and environmental injustice as inspiration, she empowers young readers to seek connections to the real world and to use their imaginations to act on behalf of their communities. An ALA Robert F. Seibert Honor recipient, Patricia's books have received star reviews, ALA Notable Recognition, Green Earth Book Awards, an Outstanding Science Trade Book Award, a Parent's Choice Award, and has been honored as a Junior Library Guild selection, as well as been included on Bank Street College's Best Books list. One Texas librarian wrote, "Patricia is one of the best nonfiction authors writing for our students in today's market and one of our must-have authors for every collection." Patricia frequently speaks at schools and conferences to share how children of any age can affect change. Her presentations have been described as phenomenal, fantastic, mesmerizing, passionate, and inspirational. Patricia Newman, it is an honor to have you here because you speak about issues that are so near and dear to my heart. So welcome to Magical Books for Kids.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, I read up on your website, and for people who want to find out more about Patricia, it's www.patricianewman.com. It's a phenomenal website that you have there, not only listing all your wonderful books and everything, but you have blogs and you talk about, I was reading about like your best friend and everything and how she's in Florida, and you're in California and everything.
Right. Well, before we get to my Florida friend, I just want to make one tiny correction on my website. It's patricianewman.com, because long ago when I
that's my mistake. No, that's not your mistake. This is my mistake.
Well, that's all right. Long ago when I wanted a domain name, Patricia Newman was already taken, so I just stuck my middle initial in there.
I was about to compliment, saying, "How did you get Patricia Newman?" Because I couldn't get Michael Sullivan. So
well, back to my friend in Florida. I always call her season challenged, because Florida is Florida. There aren't very many changes in the weather, like there are in other places in our country. So I always, when I was a kid, I always gathered fall leaves from Vermont and I pressed them between wax paper and I sent them to her.
Wow. Well, maybe you should send some to me because I'm in Florida too. So, I lived on Long Island and in New York City for such a long time. I was so tired of the winters and everything.
Right.
So let's make sure that people understand. It's www.patricianewman.com.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I saw Patricia Newman and I went right over the M that was in there. So thank you for correcting me as well. Now, as a child, I saw that you said you referred to yourself as a nerd because you probably read a lot of books. Right?
I was a nerd.
Yeah. So were there any particular books that you enjoyed the most growing up?
Well, I loved mysteries. I absolutely devoured every series mystery I could get my hands on. Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys. I loved the Bobbsey twins. I loved Trixie Belden series. I mean, I'm probably dating myself here. I loved Harriet the Spy. I particularly loved the notebook that she kept. And I continue to use that notebook idea as I research my own books. I'm not spying on people, but I am interviewing people and recording their thoughts and their quotes and concepts. So that notebook idea from Harriet the Spy stuck with me.
Now, you also went to a fabulous school in Cornell. and you said you met your husband there, and he had a very good sense of humor. He basically said to you, you just hit pay dirt. It's the best gift you ever got, right? So I assume that he's been very supportive of you over the years. So I always like to mention the spouses, because spouses are a big important part of our author journeys. You know, that's really important to have that
That's so
support.
kind of you, Michael, because it's absolutely true. My husband and I have been married for about 37 years, and he has been a patron of the arts ever since I first stuck a toe in the children's publishing waters. He has been supportive. He's been a first reader. He's been with me at many events. He went with me to New Orleans to receive the Cybert honor and attended that ceremony. He cheers me on at every step of the way, and so do my children. It's really fun to feel that sort of love and support that they give me.
Sure, yeah, because families don't. I'm sure that they do realize, but some of them probably don't realize this is that support that you get through the years keeps inspiring you in many ways. You
It
have
does.
that.
You know, nobody really realizes it, but the children's publishing industry is pretty stressful. The creativity is wonderful and beautiful, and you know, the creative process is just so fulfilling. But then there's the business of publishing, trying to get published, trying to get noticed, trying to speak at events, trying to schedule school visits, all of those little business things, managing a website, especially when it goes down for some reason. What do? You don't have a tech support department. So all of those things can be pretty stressful. And what I didn't know at the beginning, when I first showed an interest in children's publishing, is that I needed to have many, many more skills than just writing. I needed to have promotional skills. I needed to have tech skills. I needed to have people skills. I needed to have, so nobody really trains you on all of these things when you say, oh, I want to write a book, but you have to develop them along the way. So as my husband, going back to that spousal support, as my husband has watched me grow and develop over the years, sometimes he says, especially when the rejections fly in, sometimes he says, Patty, I wish you had gone into something less stressful, like maybe bomb disposal. So it can be stressful. It's fun and it's rewarding, but there's a lot that people don't see about being an author, not only for children, but at any level.
Sure, they see the finished product and it looks all nice and shiny and beautiful and well done, but there's such an it's a grind in many ways. And as you say, we got to be promoters, we got to market our books, we have to be the face of our books. That's difficult in itself. And you're competing with, I don't even know if the word's competing, it's just there's so many books out there. The one thing I have found since I've been doing this podcast, and we're almost at a year and a couple of months, is that there's so many talented people out there. There's so many wonderful books, not enough time to read them all, but there's so many wonderful books, just like yourself. Now, let's talk about your books. When did you become inspired to write about the subjects that you write about?
I was writing picture books, but then one day I was sitting at my breakfast table. I live in Sacramento, California, and I was eating my cereal, flipping through the newspaper like I do every morning. And I happened to see this article about graduate students from the Scripps Institute of Oceanography on who created and planned and executed an expedition to the North Pacific Central Gyre, which is where all of the plastic was accumulating. Back then, none of us had even heard the word gyre before. Nobody knew what it was. Mm-hmm. It's mass of circulating currents that sort of sucks in the plastic and holds it in one area. We call it the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And these graduate students were among the first ever to mount an expedition and study plastic. And I'd always been an outdoor person. I'd always been a water person. but this particular expedition just captivated me. I followed them along on their blog. They blogged while they were at sea. And when they returned to San Diego, I had followed each, there were 17 different scientists, and I tried to get to know each scientist through their blogs. And while I was reading, I chose three. And I contacted those three women, they all happened to be women, and asked them if they would be interested in working with me on a book called Plastic Ahoy. And they all jumped at the chance. I'm still in contact with them today. So it sort of launched my environmental STEM uh, series of books, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that's amazing that you did that, that you reached out to three different people. That's incredible research. Now, how is NF magical to you? First of all, let's educate the audience. What is NF?
Oh, NF is nonfiction for those of you in the know.
Okay, so how is NF? See, I'm a sports fan, so of course I went to that. How is nonfiction magical to you?
Nonfiction is truth. It's real. It's really happening. If you pick up one of my books, Plastic Ahoy, Sea Otter Heroes, Planet Ocean, Zoo Scientists to the Rescue, Eavesdropping on Elephants, there are real people in those books doing real scientific research that matters to how endangered animals survive, how our ocean fares, how different ecosystems survive. And I find that absolutely fascinating. When I was a kid, like every other kid, I was in school, taking notes, learning, reading, etc. But when I was in science class, working on experiments that actually meant something, if I could apply them to something that was happening directly to me, that was pretty darn amazing. That connection stuck with me, and it was like being sprinkled with fairy dust almost, and thinking and seeing in a whole new way. So that part was very magical to me. And I try to bring that to readers in each of my books. I try to show each of the scientists as human beings. What were they before scientists? I want children to be able to see themselves in these scientists today and say, I can do this. I want children to understand that science is not done in a vacuum. It's done in a location. And in that location, you have a lot of support people, such as photographers and filmmakers and local people who might know the forest where the elephants are tromping through, or local or zookeepers or zoo scientists who might know the science behind how to bring a species like the black-footed ferret back from near extinction. So these things are really happening. And to me, science is magical anyway. It's just fascinating the way it applies to us and touches every single aspect of our lives. And the whole environmental component for me is, it just makes so much sense because without our planet, without our ocean, without our terrestrial habitat, we simply wouldn't be. So we need to preserve these things. And the more we understand about how nature interacts with each other, how plants interact with animals, and how animals interact with insects, and how insects interact with people, the better we can make informed decisions about how to move forward.
Sure. I mean, in any aspect, education gives you an incredible experience, but it also allows you to think in different ways that you never thought you would be able to think. When we had our two daughters, the environment became very important to me because I didn't want to leave I want to leave a healthy planet for my children. and hopefully someday grandchildren. So that's a hint to them if they're listening. But yeah, so that's, to me, that's a great thing. And then I looked at your website and I saw the pictures of you talking to these big groups of children and everything. Do you get inspired? Do you get inspired when I was going out and talking to people about books, our books or whatever? The children are kind of inspiring. They're an open book. There's no filters. They'll say what they have to say, and they have no inhibitions. How is that for you to go out and to talk to the children? It's their world. They're the future. It's their world, about protecting this planet and keeping this planet healthy.
Talking to kids is one of my favorite things to do. Writing for them is great, but talking to them is even better. I'm a former teacher, so I'm used to talking to kids. In fact, sometimes I think I'm better with kids than I am with adults. But
That's okay.
but I love hearing their take on the world. So, for instance, if I present at an assembly and I plan to talk about sea otter heroes, one of the first questions I ask is, what do you know about sea otter heroes? Well, you would be amazed how much elementary students at any level know about sea otter heroes. It's absolutely amazing what they know. And I think about myself at that age, and I think I didn't know anything about sea otters. And then one time I was actually presenting on Long Island, and the librarian asked me right at the start of the assembly, she said, well, maybe you can spend a little bit of time on your new book, Name is Reason to Smile, but we've read that as a whole group, and we'd like to segue into Plastic Ahoy. And I'm thinking, whoa, those books couldn't be more different.
Yeah, right.
And so I asked the kids for help. This was a group of third graders. And I asked them, let's compare Name is Reason to Smile, which is about a social justice issue of access to education, and Plastic Ahoy, which is about garbage in the sea.
Right.
I said, how are they different? And the kids raised their hands, and one by one, they put together this list. They said, NEMA is illustrated and Plastic Ahoy has photos. They said NEMA is fiction and Plastic Ahoy is nonfiction. They said NEMA is about equal access to education and Plastic Ahoy is about garbage. And there were a few other things that they listed. And then I said to these third graders, now tell me how they're the same. And one third grader stood up very confidently and she said, they both want us to do something. That is so powerful. She was exactly right. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. But students are so much more than we think they are. Kids in general, they're so much more than we give them credit for. And I just love seeing that when I'm in an assembly. I was talking to a group of second graders one time about correlation for how sea otters could possibly save seagrass. And I showed them two graphs and they understood correlation. So we have to give them credit. We have to challenge them. We have to keep them thinking because their brains are moving at 90 miles an hour.
Are you finding, because you do go to these classes and these assemblies, and I have to think that the assembly is such a wonderful experience because it's a big group and everything, and you're getting all sorts of different answers, and there's a lot of great participation. But you're finding schools are taking these books into their schools or into their libraries more?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I talked to a lot of educators at various conferences, science and reading and library conferences, and they're all very excited about the wonderful array of nonfiction that is being published these days. My friend Melissa Stewart calls it infolicious, and I love that. I love that term. It's not only a diverse array of topics and writing styles, but it's a diverse array of authors as well.
And you mentioned that the ocean in 3 different books, Plastic Ahoy, Sea Otter Heroes, and now Planet Ocean. Why is the ocean so inspiring to you? I mean, to me, the beach is beautiful. It's like that's why the ocean's important to me. Is like I wish we could clean up all the oceans and because I see the oceans like in Greece and everything, and it's like so crystal clear blue, and it's just so glorious to look at. And then you see other places, it's all dirty and muddy, and I wonder how we got to that particular point. Whereas in other places, it's absolutely gorgeous. So why is the ocean so inspiring to you?
The ocean has always been part of my life. Visiting family in Rhode Island and spending the day at the Atlantic Ocean. We
Mhm.
lived on a lake in Vermont. We
Uh,
sailed, we fished. The
mhm.
water has always been a place of enjoyment for me, fun, calm, inspiration. And I find myself drawn to stories about water. I've got a new book coming out in 2022 called A River's Gifts about a river in northern Washington state. So I just can't seem to get away from water, I guess. But it's inspiring to me. There's a sense of calm and creativity. It's actually been linked to this calm and creativity. There's a scientific link between the ocean and what it does for us. And the ocean is not only that for us, it's so much more. It's half of our air, it's our drinking water. Because of the water cycle, um, rain evaporates. I mean, the water evaporates from the ocean and condenses to form clouds. The clouds push on over the land and it rains. So that's where our fresh water actually comes from. And weather is generated in the ocean, and food and livelihoods, all of these things are provided by the ocean. So what I'm trying to do in Planet Ocean is to connect people to the sea. Michael, you mentioned going to the ocean and looking out and seeing how beautiful it is, and that's true. But in Planet Ocean, I want you to look below the surface. The book is written with an underwater perspective. I even took scuba diving lessons with Annie Crawley, the
Wow,
photographer.
you're amazing. You do it all. I love that. You're like Ernest Hemingway. You know?
Well, that's a wonderful comparison. Thank you.
Yeah,
But
no, because he did his whole everything he wrote about is some of his experiences, but you end up doing the research now. That's wonderful. So how was it scuba diving? Tell me from to somebody who hasn't been scuba diving.
it's different. You have to wear a lot of heavy equipment, which feels very heavy on land, but the minute you
Hmm.
get in the water, you hardly know you're wearing it. It's so buoyant.
Wow. Okay.
Um, I was scuba diving with Annie Crawley's dive team. She runs a dive team up in Seattle.
Okay.
And wow, compared to me, they're all experts now. They were swimming circles around me with cameras, photographing my every move and laughing at all of my mistakes. And at one point, I think I was breathing too hard, using up too much air. I was trying to
Uh,
be breathe in slow and breathe out slow, but evidently that used up way too much air. So I had to just learn to breathe normally. Um,
wow. So you have
one
to
of the
get rid of that
safety things
panic.
you have to do is actually take the regulator out of your mouth, the very thing that provides your air, and drop it and learn how to retrieve it and put it back in your mouth.
Oh my goodness, I get like so scared doing that.
So it
Wow.
was a blast. It was a blast.
Right, right. But obviously there's people there just in case you didn't
Oh, I had
yeah,
plenty of lifeguards there. I wasn't worried for a moment,
yeah.
but it's a different experience because you can't talk. And most of our communication is done through talking.
Hmm.
You have to use hand signals to get across how you're feeling or how you're doing. And in fact, if you download the curriculum guide for Planet Ocean, there's a lesson on divers' hand signals. And the cool thing about these hand signals is they are universal. Throughout the
Wow.
world, divers use these same hand signals, no matter what language they speak. They use these same hand signals.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
pretty
that's really
cool.
cool. I never
I
thought
didn't
about
realize
that before.
yeah, I didn't
But
realize
it's
a
also
universal language like that. That's great.
right. And it's also amazing that when you're underwater, um, you still have a sense of hearing. You can hear the bubbles around you.
Hmm.
Annie says you can hear the fish chomping on the coral. So you still have your sense of hearing. It's just this verbal communication you don't have anymore. You have a sense of touch. You definitely have a sense of temperature. I was wearing a wetsuit in a pool, but when Annie dives in the Pacific Northwest, she has to wear a dry suit because the water hovers around 45, 47 degrees.
Wow, that's
So
very, very
and
interesting.
there's a lot of physics to diving too.
Hmm. Yeah, and I wasn't good at physics in school. I was into the English, the reading the books, the writing, the creative writing, and everything. And you've done it all. I mean, to me, that's wonderful research. And you have been mentioning some of the interesting parts where your research does take you. What's the most interesting, besides the scuba diving? What was the most interesting part of research that you've had?
When I wrote Sea Otter Heroes, I went to the Elkhorn Slough with my daughter, and my daughter took many of the photos that are in that book. So we were kind of like a mother-daughter research team, which was a blast anyway. And I was sort of expecting, a trip to the lab and having Dr. Brent Hughes just sort of walk us through what he'd done. But we were with him for 2 days, and for the whole first day, we were on a boat in the Elkhorn Slough. And that was absolutely phenomenal. If I can be on a boat in the water, I am happy.
It,
When
it
I
is.
when I researched eavesdropping on elephants, I did not get to go to Africa because the scientists were not in Africa at the time, but I did go to their lab. And one of the most amazing experiences I had in the lab was simply sitting at the computer with a set of headphones on, and I'm listening to forest noises, trying to identify the elephants just by listening.
Mhm.
Harder than it sounds. But at one point, I'm sitting there with my eyes closed. I've got the headphones covering my ears. They're noise canceling headphones, so you can't hear anything else outside of what's in your ears. And there's this mosquito buzzing in my ear that I keep thrashing away, like you do
Mhm.
with mosquitoes. And then it occurred to me, wait, that's not in the room. That's in my ear.
Mhm.
Those forest sounds were so real right then. I didn't know that I would feel so immersed in the forest sitting in a lab in Ithaca, New York.
Were you able to identify the elephant sounds with all the sounds going around?
I was, because I had been tutored already by my daughter who worked for the Elephant Listening Project, and was the one who gave me the idea for this book. And also I had interviewed the scientists already, so I kind of knew what I was listening for. But elephants make a surprising number of sounds. They rumble and they screech and they do something called an auga, which is sort of a combination of rumbles and roars. They communicate infrasonically, which means below our range of hearing. That was an absolutely fascinating book to write. Um, there's a lot of physics around sound, and I'm not great at physics. I'm kind of like you. I was more of a word person.
Right.
But again, there's an application to this physics of sound. It's saving elephants. And once you add that component for me, the science becomes magical.
Yeah. Now, just to skirt back to your next book, which is in 2022 about the river in Washington State, what fascinated or slash inspired you to write about a river in Washington State? What makes that? Is there something different or unique about it?
There's something very unique about that river. For thousands and thousands of years, it provided, it fed the ecosystem and had a wonderful salmon run and fed the lower Elwha Clallam tribe that called that area home since time immemorial. And then settlers came and dammed the river for hydropower in two places. And those dams sat in place for 100 years as everybody watched the salmon runs die, as everybody watched the ecosystem change because the salmon were no longer bringing back the nutrients from the ocean to fertilize the soil that grew the trees, that grew the bushes, that fed the elk, that fed the bears. It's a huge cascade of change.
Yeah.
And then the lower Elwha Clallam tribe and the Olympic National Park and concerned townspeople got together, and after many years of arguing, they took the dams down. So the ecosystem is restoring itself.
Wow. Isn't it so interesting how one thing can change a lot?
Yes, it's
For,
amazing.
yeah, it
It's
is.
amazing.
It is. And the only way people understand this is to be educated about it.
Right,
You
right.
know?
You know, I think sometimes we as human beings, since we're at the top of the food chain, we sort of forget that
Mhm,
everything links to everything else.
mhm.
And unless we sort of assimilate that into our way of thinking, into our lives, then our earth is always going to be in trouble. We have to start working with the earth. Um, so that book is called A River's Gifts. And I found out about it because, again, we're going back to the support of our spouses. My husband came home from work one day
Mm.
and said, my colleague's daughter is working for the Elwha River revegetation effort. She's actually planting seeds and seedlings where the former lakes used to be behind the two dams.
Wow.
And he said, this could possibly be a book idea, don't you think?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I said, absolutely. So I started with our friend's child and I went out from there. I interviewed a botanist who took me on a hike through the former lake bed. I interviewed a wildlife expert. I interviewed a fish biologist. I interviewed all different kinds of people. The lower Elwha Clallam tribe has been invaluable, helping me along and being patient with me and correcting me when I've got something wrong. It's just been a marvelous experience. And we're now at the illustration stage. Natasha Donovan is the illustrator. She's from the state of Washington, and she is doing amazing things. I can't wait for you all to see it in 2022.
Wow, you're awesome. You do it all. You write impact type of books, you research it, and you're talking to the people that are the actual experts with the experience and everything. And you can't do better than that. And of course, it is nonfiction. It's not like fiction where I write and it's like you can make up anything, I mean, that type of thing. Nonfiction has a major impact, especially kids younger. So you're making an impact with these young minds, and maybe they will leave their children eventually a better world. So that's always been my goal is to make sure that my kids were good human beings, and they are, and to be concerned and to make sure that they leave, the earth better than they were here. To me, that's a great goal for any particular person.
Right. I'm so glad you feel that way.
Yeah, and you're doing your part. So people can find the books on Amazon as well, or on online stores as well.
Yes.
So they're
Yes.
available.
Amazon.com, bookshop.org, all of those, barnesandnoble.com, all of those places.
Right. And it's www.patricia M, as in Michael, Newman, Newman. So if they did Google Patricia Newman, what would come up? I was sure. I did that, and your name came up. I put author Patricia Newman in, and you came up right away.
Yeah, I will come up that way. I'll come up that way.
You see, these are things we authors worry about, because we're out there saying, what's going to happen if they do this, because there's so many Michael Sullivans. There'd be like a ton of them before I come up, but it
Right.
seems like you've done a great job, not only marketing and promoting, but you're getting out there. Are you seeing a little bit more interest getting out there now that well, now we got the Delta variant coming, but is there any more interest in like having you come and speak to students, or do a Zoom call and speak to students?
Well, that's really interesting. Throughout the pandemic, I've been busy.
Yeah,
I've been doing lots of virtual presentations. I just did 3 presentations for the National Science Teaching Association virtual conference. I did a presentation for the National Marine Educators Association conference. I've spoken to a number of students throughout. When Planet Ocean came out, I had 20-minute Planet Ocean chats, boom, 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 right after each other. I think
That's great.
I think I had about 25 sessions over 2 days. And that was fabulous. And the kids were amazing. One thing that I haven't mentioned about Planet Ocean is that in addition to all of the text and the sidebars and the table of contents and the glossary, which of course teachers and parents and librarians love, that book also has QR codes. So Annie Crawley is the photographer in the book, but Annie Crawley is also a filmmaker. And in order to give readers an underwater perspective, in each chapter, there are at least two QR codes that you can scan and watch video of Annie diving. So you can go underwater with Annie. It's such an amazing add-on.
That is clever.
To a book that, you know, you really want. I really wanted to feel kids get wet when they read this book. I wanted them to go underwater.
Congratulations. First of all, that's a fabulous idea. And I had never heard that done with a book. So obviously this is a first for me. So
I'm going to convert you to be a nonfiction author, see?
Well, yeah, you know, originally I was nonfiction because I was covering sports, you know, for like all these different newspapers and everything like that. So initially I was a nonfiction writer, and then I wrote a novel, which was originally going to be a memoir. But then I said, nobody's going to be interested in my life story. So I wrote it as a fiction story, and it became like a time travel series, you know, and it's still going. So yeah. I mean, I love nonfiction. I love reading autobiographies about people and everything like that. To me, the people are fascinating, you know. And of course, you're doing something that's making a major impact. So once again, www.patricianewman.com. Her books are on Amazon as well. And her latest book is Planet Ocean. So congratulations on making such a beautiful impact in this world. I applaud you and I thank you, because I have children and I want this world to be a wonderful place for them to live in as well. And thank you for joining us again for another edition of Magical Books for Kids, which is sponsored by Magic Everywhere INC, a company based in Florida. This podcast, as well as all our podcasts, are free on all platforms. So Patricia M. Newman, thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Magical Books for Kids, a podcast sponsored by Magic Everywhere INC, a company based in Florida, hosted by Michael John Sullivan. This is your place to hear the very best children's stories and an opportunity to get to know your favorite authors. Join us for another fun storytelling podcast next week.